Hey, hey,
Hi.
I am sorry I'm running late. My headphones died. Like, as I'm starting, I'm like, why are these not working? I'm like, dude, time. And you know the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Are you late? I feel like
I'm
you're
like a minute late. So I'm British though. I'm like I'm the person if I'm not 5 minutes early, I'm like running late and yeah,
Oh,
so
well,
that's me.
lucky for you, I'm the person that if I'm running 5 minutes late, I'm considered on time.
There you go.
So,
Perfect. Well, we're like the perfect combination for this conversation. It's so great to meet you. It's
so nice
honestly
to meet you.
I'm so
Thank you
chuffed
for
that you
having
said
me.
that you would be up for this. I was saying to my wife, she knows I'm a big fan of Pete. I love Pete's stuff. I love his podcast. I love people that are exploring spirituality and life and have come from the tradition of Christianity, which is my background. But don't have the kind of shackles that are required within that tradition.
Mm.
And so I've always loved that. And she will testify to you. I'm like, I have been so stoked about the podcast that you guys are doing because I'm like, this
Oh,
is it. This is really condensed. This is what I listen to Pete talking to comedians. I'm like, I love comedy. I could listen to Pete talking to comedians for 3 hours, but really I listen to him talk to comedians for 3 hours. So I get some like 20 minutes juice of like, well, what do they actually think about life and this,
right.
whatever, if we can so split it up like that, or, it's all good. It's all
Yeah.
consensual, right? But so like it was just
Right,
like
right.
this conversation with Al. I'm like, this is it. It's just 2 hours of awesome. Like everything is awesome. I love it.
Yeah,
So
we're getting to the good stuff right away.
oh, I love it so much. And so yeah, I just thought, I would love to dive into your journey and like and maybe unpack some of the things you've been talking about on the podcast, things like working through Katie Byer and stuff, or Byron Katie. I keep getting my brain. I had Stephen Mitchell on
Everyone.
my podcast just last week, and I did the same thing. And I'm like, dude, of all the people you get the name wrong to, don't do it to her husband, But all good.
Oh, that's
All
so
good.
funny. But he's also I barely know him, but he from what Pete has told me, he's also kind of the perfect person to do that too.
Absolutely.
Or and Katie would be too, because both
Yeah.
of them are like, my name isn't who I am.
Right. They're like, who even is that?
Right. Yeah. It's like, okay, might as well be Katie
Oh, I
Bright
love it.
Byron.
I absolutely love it. But like again, that's what I've loved about your conversations with Pete in a sense is like I was saying to Till, I was like, man, I have tried to get into Katie's stuff so much. And there's been levels of blockages for the over the years. I tried it a couple of years ago and I wasn't it's before I'd had any experience with maybe psychedelics. It's before I'd maybe really delved into meditation where I really was able to meditate. Like I tried meditation, but I was failing miserably if you can pass or fail at meditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was something about like I was starting to tiptoe into it. I was like, I'm getting this. I kind of am getting it. I'm able to do some of the work. And then when it was like listening to you guys talk through it, I was like, oh, and it was like, just legs on the whole thing. There was something about that's how it works. And so you
Yeah.
guys have been my
Yeah.
gurus for the last kind of however
Oh,
long you've been doing it, 5 weeks or so. You've been helping me do the work just by exploring what that tangibly has looked like this week.
wow.
So yeah,
Well,
thank
I'm
you.
happy to hear that. And you're not alone in that introduction to Katie, because I also have been throughout the years, people recommend, when you're like into this stuff, people
Mm-hmm.
will always recommend, people who are in the same field. And people would recommend her to me. And I actually listened to her book, A Mind at Home with Itself, when I was pregnant. And I was like, this is cool, but it just like wasn't earth shattering. And I certainly didn't practice the work then. And then Pete got interested in her. And I was like, I don't think that's for me. Like, I just didn't seem like it just didn't seem like the way to it for me. It
Yeah.
wasn't the road. Um, and then I listened a little bit more to her stuff, and I kind of got locked in.
Mm.
Um, but that being said, Pete still is like, she has changed his relationship with his parents.
Mm.
He is like very like practicing the work every day. And
Wow.
I can see how it was it's been really important for him because he's the type of person who, we always talk about it. He's like, so it's kind of what makes him a good comedian is that he has like very firm beliefs and opinions on things and on everything,
right.
Like everything he comes across, he has an opinion about it.
Right. Love it or hate it, kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. And then tell you exactly why he loves it or exactly why he hates it.
That's so funny.
And so for someone like that, it's really powerful because you start to think that your beliefs are truth, and you lose sight of the fact that like everything is perception and being filtered through your own experience.
Right. Yeah. That's
yeah. So
that makes sense to me because I'm very like that as well. And my wife will laugh because I am like, I'll talk about non-dualism, but I'm probably the most dualistic person in the planet. Like I'm so absolute all, nothing, good, bad, right, wrong. And I'm so like catastrophic in my thinking, like we had some people around doing some work today, which stresses me out anyway, doing some like DIY in the house. And I'm like, you do that. You're an expert, fix it. And they didn't do a great job. And this is why you don't get cowboys to kind of do the job. But we didn't have many options. And I'm like, it's fine. And as we're doing it, I look up at the roof and I'm like, what's that? And I kind of climb up on a chair and start poking. I'm like, oh, cool. We've got a leak. Like the roof is wet, And but like, it's so funny because like my wife is like, so, she can have her own stuff, but she's so chill with stuff. Like she's like, oh, well, we'll call a plumber and we'll just see what it is. There's no need to worry. Maybe it's even the neighbor's thing. It might not even be our problem. Like I am literally like, oh my God, there's a whole bath of water right above my head. We move wrong and the whole house will be a swimming pool and then we'll be in debt. We're going to lose the house. We're going to lose so much money. Like my mind is like off and I'm getting so much better at kind of going, is that true? Can I know that? Right. And in some ways it's so easy for someone a bit like me or Pete because our truth is so farcical in a sense because it's so extreme, if that makes sense. Like, is it true? No, there's definitely not that much water up there because there's the bedroom is above there, right? It's like, it can't be that much water.
Yes.
And so it's just so funny. But I think it is, it's so intriguing, the work. But what I love as well, and this is something I was really keen to have you on. By the way, we've dove right in. I'm sorry. At some point, we'll ask you, how was your day? Are you doing well?
I mean, this is all I want to talk about. So I'm happy to dive right in.
So, but I want to talk about you as well. And we'll maybe dive into that at some point. But I'm really intrigued. You talk a lot about, and this is something I work with a lot. The people I work with are coming out of toxic religion, more often than not, some form of evangelical Christianity, something like that. And a lot of them have like religious trauma, which is kind of like a subset of complex PTSD and, all sorts of different stuff. And you talk quite openly in the podcast you're doing about your work through trauma as well. And almost as a side by side of the work that you're doing with Katie Byron, or Katie. Yeah. Lord help me, honestly.
You just call her Katie.
I want to, and then I just can't help but add one more. I'm like, but Byron's in there somewhere. Anyway, whatever. But I think that's a really interesting component because it's something that I know my wife struggled with a lot, and I don't struggle as much with Katie's stuff because it's quite intellectual, and I think I live in my head and my thoughts, and I'm like, yes, okay, if I just look at that thought, that's the problem, and if I change that thought, then it's fixed. And I am not grounded in myself. Like I can be like morbidly depressed for 4 days and my wife goes, what's up? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? And she's like, you seem really down. And it's only after looking back I'm like, oh yeah, I've been really depressed for like 4 days. I just am not as aware of my stuff like emotionally. And I know a lot of the work that you've been doing in your own process going through trauma and stuff is very much like what's going on in the body, what's being stored in the body. Like I'm really intrigued by that. Like how did you get into all the kind of like trauma side of things, and how does it differ? How does it kind of work in this kind of world of mind, body. It was very dualistic again, how we break that up, right? It's very
Yeah.
Descartes or whatever, right? You've got your mind and your soul, your mind and your body, and yeah.
And never the two shall meet.
Never, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, I'm just so excited about this question because it's all I think about, really. And I'm not surprised that your wife is having kind of this. It sounds like you and your wife are having the same dynamic with Katie as Pete and I, where for me, I can really get into Katie when she's talking about like pure awareness and I guess everything kind of that the work leads you to, that's when she's totally my jam. But you're right, the work and the reason why it doesn't work for me all the time, or it isn't what I subscribe to all the time, is because it's kind of, it's like getting to pure awareness by playing your mind's games. Like your mind is what's blocking you, and you are like appeasing it, and you're kind of beating it at its own game. And for me, what has been more successful, if I could use that word, to getting back to identifying with pure awareness, what's been more successful and what's been more fulfilling is cultivating a relationship with my body and going through my body. So it's not that my mind isn't doing, in fact, I think the whole situation of like the worst case scenarios and spiraling out and everything that you shared is a voice that all of us have. My therapist would call it the strategic mind. And so the strategic mind is always thinking of worst case scenarios. It's always planning and organizing. It's trying to make sense of what your experiences are. It wants answers. It wants plans. It wants like security, basically. And if you think about it, it's also tied to me, it's tied to masculine energy and feminine energy, because that's a very like masculine thing. And I'm not saying men, I mean, women
Sure.
can have more masculine energy and men can have, Pete, we like to say is 60-40. He's like 60 masculine, 40 feminine. But your body is just more feminine in the sense of being intuitive, feeling, being flexible, being like flowing. Like it's 1 minute it's feeling something and the next minute it's feeling another thing. And it's fine with that. It's the mind that's like, well, that doesn't make sense. I was okay with this person hugging me before, and now I'm using that example because my 2-year-old daughter just found a friend, and I'm seeing this pattern because she has no filter. So like 1 minute she'll be okay with this friend hugging her, and the next she's like, no. And she has no problem saying no. There's no accountability for like, well, you were okay with it before, you know?
Right. Yeah. Some deep consent lessons in there somewhere, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And she's just listening to her body, like whatever her body is wanting in that moment. So that's a long introduction to answering your question, but I started doing trauma work. It all kind of came up for me when I got pregnant. It's a funny story of like, I did a lot of, I knew that we were going to be trying to get pregnant. So we did like a bunch of psychedelics beforehand.
Get it out of your system. You can't do it while you're pregnant, probably. You know, you might as well enjoy it now.
Exactly. Yes. I was like, this is my last, I can't foresee. I mean, not only will I not do it when I'm pregnant, I'm probably going to not do it or feel differently about it when I have a baby. And so we did a bunch, and I did the exact same amount of everything as Pete, who's like 100 pounds heavier. Yeah, he's a huge man. So I really I think what was happening in my mind was I depleted serotonin and dopamine, but I think my body used that as an opportunity to be like, there's some stuff in here that you have not acknowledged that needs that needs clearing out to like make way literally for new life, and to stop patterns that are happening. So it was this huge opportunity. And I didn't know, by the way, I mean, that's in hindsight. Like, I didn't know that that's what was happening. But all I knew that was happening was that I was depressed in a way that I had never been. And I was having like 6-hour panic attacks. Wow. And so I have come to see now that that was my body's wisdom being like, we will no longer let you ignore this. Like, right. And anxiety like that is just your body saying there's something in here that needs to be addressed. Right. It's not whatever you think you're anxious about. That's not actually an issue. It's the anxiety comes first, and then the organizing mind later gives it a story. Well, we must be anxious because of COVID or the fires. Or, I mean, there's anybody's choice that's happening right now.
There's so many stories we could just pick, right? That easily bypass the actual issue potentially, because it's not hard to find something that I'm probably anxious about right now.
That's right, absolutely. So then it's just a matter of going. So when I feel like anxious about something, I can I just try to like, and I don't do this all the time. Sometimes I can get really pulled into the mind, and it's only in hindsight that I recognize like, oh shit, I was really pulled in there. Right. Yeah. I really believed all of the stories. But more and more I'm trying to notice the anxiety and just kind of, you can't really quiet the mind. You just allow the mind to tell its story, and you create this spaciousness of, okay, that's one thing that's happening. That's like one voice. Are there any other voices in there that want to say something? And you like give your body a chance to sing its song or to tell its version of things. And you just kind of feel the feeling without, and your mind will go, okay, this will never end. I'm going to feel this forever. It'll tell its own stories. And then you just kind of say, okay, yeah, I see that. Thank you. But you don't latch onto it or follow it. And really what I found when I was pregnant and practicing this is that the feelings come up and they feel really intense, and you just sit with the sensation. And then it's almost like as soon as you realize all that's happening is I just have like a lot of energy flowing right now, right, or wherever it is in your body. Right. It just like, just kind of dissipates. Yeah. So it was a big practice. My first practice with trauma, before I even knew that I was really dealing with trauma, was sitting with the feeling and saying, thank you, I release you, or thank you, when you're ready, I release you, and letting it just come up and out with all these really intense feelings. And then later I found a really great therapist, because once you get deep into trauma work, you need some kind of guide, I think. Not to say that you can't do some healing on your own, but you're going to like your scariest places, and it's really like your child self is going to its scariest places. So it's a child, you need supervision.
Right. Yeah. Get some safe people in there.
But the thing that has come from it is I have been, for the first time in my life, most of the time, I am very embodied. Wow. And I have found that when I am in my body, everything else just kind of falls into place. And when there is, it doesn't mean that I'm like always happy, but there's actually a sense of order that is created way more than if I let the mind try to organize. It's like, it's way more organized if you are in your body as opposed to your mind. So then your mind can kind of settle down once you sense that there's like a grounded organization to all of this. Yeah. And it's a huge gift. I mean, it's changed my life. And then you look back and you realize how disembodied you were and how disconnected you know? And that's a really common thing for trauma. Of course it is, because your body hasn't been a safe place. It's been having extreme feelings, and it had them at a time when you didn't have the resources to deal with it. That's what trauma is.
Right.
So it's a very smart defense to be like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
You know,
Later. Let's not go there.
I'm cutting off the connection. You know, you're causing problems. We're just not going to talk to you. That's your mind to your body, you know? Yeah.
That's
so
crazy.
I'm really, as you can tell, I'm too excited about this. I have a million things to say about it, but,
and I am like, I've probably been the quietest I've been in a long time. I was just editing a podcast I did with Rob Bell. I think you guys know Rob. Rob. And I was laughing because, man, that was an ego trip for me, because I've been following Rob for like since I was like a teenager. We used to show his like pneumo videos to like the youth group and stuff. So I love Rob, and I'm like, oh my God, this is it. And I was feeling so in my body the whole day. Like I was like quite anxious, uptight, but I didn't know why. I was like, Rob is like a personal communicator. Like he is the easiest going guy in the world. He's the nicest guy in the world. If I came up and was like, Rob, he would still be like, hey, hi, welcome to Phil's show. You know, he would like take over and help me, you know, like, and yeah, I couldn't help like not be in that space. And I just realized, good God, it was only a few days later I was doing the work, and I was like, oh, that was my child. That was the little boy that wants Rob to think, oh, look at Phil. Isn't he also amazing? Isn't he also cool or funny or whatever, right? Whatever that is. It's like my ego going on some trip of like, recognize and acknowledge me, Rob, and whatever. But all that to say is just aside, but like, man, that was some deep work that happened in me. And then when I got to speak to Stephen, who I also really respect, probably haven't followed him for nearly as long because I was a good evangelical Christian boy. I wasn't going to be reading his translation of like the Bag of the Vita, you know, Jing or whatever. But when I spoke to him, I was like, oh, that stuff's coming up minimally, and I can just be like, huh, interesting. Okay, cool. Good to know. And let it go. And just allow that to happen. But what I was going to say, anyway, the reason I brought it up was I was editing this podcast with Rob, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, I spend 3 minutes asking a question that Rob takes like 30 seconds to answer. And I'm like, so I am like the most quiet I've ever been, because I'm just like, please talk about this stuff. Like, so please do not feel like you on any level you are rambling about this, because I am so intrigued. And also I spend day in, day out talking to hundreds of people that are working through their trauma, working through these extraordinarily just screwed up situations, you know, from abuse systems or even like more spiritually abusive, like they have believed in a big God in the sky that's watching everything they do, and they will hit them with a stick for eternity if they do X wrong or Y right. You know, it's just, and then even when you don't believe in God that way, maybe you have a new concept of God, or maybe you don't even believe in a hell, you're still waking up in the dead of night freaking out about hell or whatever, you know, because you've grown up with that thing, that the inner child that is pushed down. How many times did we push that kid down as a Christian when you were going, really? So for eternity, even if you're good, but you didn't say the prayer? And it's like, well, just push that one down. We're not going to look there too closely. That kid's coming to the surface in a dream, or maybe when we're lying trying to get to sleep, and he suddenly comes up and is like, you know, you don't believe in that anymore, but what if you're wrong? Right. From what I learned in church, if you're wrong, you're really fucked. Right? You know? Yes. Like things are not going to go well for you, Phil, if you get hit by a car tomorrow and it turns out you're wrong. And so there's some deep stuff people are like, you know, navigating, and even when they intellectually, like we're talking about, right? Intellectually, I have people message me and go, I've not believed in hell for a decade, and yet still am racked by fear that I'm going to get sent somewhere that I don't even believe in. So it's not an intellectual I mean, maybe on some level they do believe. I think intellectually they do clearly believe on some levels, something, some inner child, some part, however we frame that. What does that look like as we, you know, there's a lot of that you're talking about, just like going, okay, what's going on in my body in the day-to-day? I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a bit anxious. All right, well, let's let myself be anxious. Let me observe it. Let me see what's going on. But is there a different kind of protocol of like, okay, I know there's certain things that bother me. They only come up here, there, or everywhere. They're not like a constant nag, or they're not a whatever. Like, how do people go about? I'm thinking of that example specifically because, good God, I get a dozen messages like that every week, at least, specifically about being
Mm-hmm.
racked with fear about a belief like hell or something in the past, kind of just nagging them
Mm-hmm.
here and there. Like, is there a
Mm-hmm.
process in which, rather than a as we go kind of process and just observe, work through, go through, is there a process that we can kind of start digging in a sense? Is that something
Mm-hmm.
that, like, you know, you talk about having therapy, maybe that's a key component, having someone that kind of knows how to dig, knows where to prod.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
how would you go about that kind of component of dealing with that kind of traumatic stuff?
Yeah, it is interesting. That's a great question. I mean, I'm such a proponent of therapy, but I'm also a huge proponent of meditation. And I
Mm,
think that both of those things are sort of inviting. I mean, there's like a little bit of an opening there of like, okay, show me my work. I mean, and we all have it. We all have our sort of assignment, and or karma, or however you want to look at it. These are the things that we've been given to work through, and so therapy for sure. But also, if you are just getting still, and practicing stillness, which, I mean, it can be as simple as, for people who don't meditate, it can be as simple as sitting. Right now I'm cross-legged with a straight spine, um, focusing on your breath. So really, you're just placing your attention on your breath.
mm,
And then when your mind inevitably wanders from your breath, you just return it back. You just label that as thinking and return it back to the breath. It's so
mm,
simple. It's like 3 steps. And just doing that and making a commitment to do that, you will notice, once your body feels safe to release, that it will start to show you things, and it will release
mm,
extreme feelings, and but for me, I think that's where Katie also comes in handy, is like, you have a belief like the Rob thing, where you just notice. I mean, it's just about starting to notice. Sometimes I say, notice when you're not noticing. Like, try to just notice, whoa, I was asleep. You'll start
right.
to realize that you're going through your day completely asleep. You're living
Oh,
in whatever world
yeah,
you're,
99%.
right? Yeah.
If I'm lucky,
Yeah.
I get a percent.
Yeah. But then that's perfect. That's the perfect point, because then you do get it might be
Mm,
1 minute a day. Or Eckhart Tolle says, just try to take one conscious breath a day. And then you'll realize that felt delicious, and you'll want to do
another
another
one.
one.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just starts with that tiny crack in the door of realizing, like, wow, I am so in my head all day. And you can't, like, resisting that doesn't work, or being like, well, I failed it today then, because I was just totally in my head. Like, none of that is very helpful information. It's just
Mm,
like, it's a constant forgetting and remembering. It's a constant opportunity to begin again. That's why the practice of focusing on your breath, and then when your mind wanders, returning back to the breath. It's like, every time you return back to the breath, you are showing your nervous system, your mind, your whole system, that the nature of life is to kind of wander and begin
mm,
again. Just it's expansion and contraction. It's in and out. It's the breath. It's the pulsation of the universe. Like, how many clues do we need? It's the tides. Like, everything is in
right.
and out, in and out.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I think there are actually a million opportunities a day to start scratching the surface of your own work.
mm,
We just aren't seeing them as opportunities. We're seeing them as like obstacles, or things that we have to just kind of power through, or ignore, or disconnect from. And for me, because I don't think this is the only way to it. But for me, just slowing down and practicing focusing on my breath, or doing a body scan, or I love this one. This is an Eckhart Tolle one. You do a body scan, and then you, with your eyes closed, you ask yourself, how do I know I have hands?
Yes.
It's incredible. It's
I absolutely love
trippy.
it. I did that the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I almost immediately, right? So this is how in the moment I was. I immediately got up and ran through to my wife, because we both work from home right now, and I'm like, you gotta try this thing. And I'm like, I kind of missed the being in it for like, I mean, I got it for a few minutes, and I'm like, now I have to share this with someone. But it's such a like, yeah, like what is, yeah, it's amazing how you can have these moments. I frequently kind of go back to like these moments that you can have on something like a psychedelic, and you have these moments, and you look at a hand and be like, what is this thing? Like, what is this thing on my arm? Wait, what's my arm? Like, or whatever, right? And you start thinking about, you start breaking down. You're like, what is, like, these are just a bunch of atoms, like just combined in a hand, and that's me. But at what point is it not me? But it's amazing when you can not be under the influence of something so powerful. So whatever it may be, a lot of people are not in that place. A lot of people listen to this are going like, wait, whoa, what? And that's okay. That's really okay. Like, that's not required by any means. And I think that's the point, is like, you can have these moments where you kind of step beyond yourself, or maybe it's not beyond yourself. It's both, probably beyond yourself, but almost into yourself as well at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's such a fascinating window that you can kind of look through and go, oh, this is what's going on. It's really, it's a profound thing.
It's a gift to be able to have an opportunity to just realize that your reality isn't all there is. That you have, and that's the gift that Katie gives, is like, just start questioning these things that you think you know for sure. And it can be so scary. And that's why I know that a lot of your listeners are in the phase of deconstruction. That is the gift of that, is it's actually kind of never over. You just are deconstructing your Christian upbringing. But once you've deconstructed then you'll find something else to deconstruct, and then it's a constant like tearing down, rebuilding, tearing it down. I mean, I just keep going back to contraction and expansion, because I feel like that's more accurate, where it's like things get really, as soon as we get too rigid, something will blow it up, or will start chipping away, or whatever. And then you get really scared. That's like existential. You're like, who am I without this? And exactly. And so there's a period of time in trauma work that I'm reading this great book for anybody who's interested in diving deep, called The Post-Traumatic Guidebook by Arielle Schwartz. And I think it's even whoever wrote the foreword, mentioned that it's actually existential work, because there is a period of time when you're working with trauma where you are stuck in between who you were and who you're meant to become. And how true is that with anything, really? Like with deconstructing your faith, that's terrifying. There's an untethered feeling to, well, if I'm not this person, often that other people have told me that I am, then who am I? And you never stay in that place. That means that you are exactly right on track. And that what you're going to find out is that you are actually way more expansive than you believed you were. That you were just looking at a tiny, tiny part, and you're pulling back the veil and seeing that there's so much more than you thought. And that's true of, that was my experience with deconstructing too, was that it in hindsight, I realized that it wasn't that I was like losing God. It was that I was seeing the smallest part of God, and that I peeled back and saw that it was way bigger and better than I even expected, you know. So it's a hero's journey. That's the whole, that's why we love, in our house, we love Moana and Frozen, and you know, like we love watching it as much as our daughter, because we're like, these stories are encoded in us.
Yeah, it's our story.
It's our story, yeah. And it's not just, this is my most recent finding, is that it's not just once. You're not just going through your hero's journey with, like I said, like with your faith or whatever, or a divorce or something, and then you're done and you get to just live the rest of your life. It's like there'll be probably hopefully a period of rest, and then you're embarking on a different one.
Right. I'm still waiting for my 10-minute rest, like from I don't know, a decade ago, or I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
It's interesting to me though, because this is something I'm fascinated by. So over the last kind of 10 years, I've maybe worked with, I don't even know, 10,000 plus people that have gone through this process of deconstructing their faith. And 95+% to them, it is this existential terror and like, holy dear God, Jesus, which way's up? Why is life? What, when, why, how, where? You know, just utter like, what is going on? When will it end? You know, is there a God? Do I want there to be a God? Who am I? What does that mean? What will happen after I die? Like all this stuff is all wrapped up in these, like you peel like one belief off and you suddenly realize, oh God, that was me. I just got rid of my existence without realizing it, right? And I got rid of my friends, my family, my community, my church, you know, little bubbles that we live in that are beautiful, amazing bubbles for people that need those in those seasons, in that time, whatever that might be. Not every kind of expression is toxic. And not every toxic expression is toxic to every person. It's very complex.
Right.
But
right.
So a huge portion of people seem to be like that from my anecdotal experience. And I'm working with some research people to be doing active research on this group as well, which is fascinating. So but I don't have data on that yet. But it does feel like there's a few people, and I'm one of them, that at no point, at any point, have I gone, oh, this isn't amazing. Like, I can get rid of something and explore something new, or like, so I'm like actively like going, where can I just like explore a belief that I have that might be horseshit? Like I can just tear it apart, and maybe it's true, and that's fine. I'll put it back on. I'll stick it back on with duct tape. But maybe if I take it off, it's not, and that'll be exciting. And it's such a different approach that I find some people have to these kind of components. Is that something? So, and what I have found is that most people eventually kind of almost become the second person. Give them enough time, and they start to go, oh, actually, oh yeah, this thing. I remember that from when I had a divorce, maybe my family member died, maybe, you know, I lost my faith. But at a certain point you go, oh yeah, this thing, I'm quite excited because I've had enough moments where I can retroactively go, and that was, like Ram Dass would say, like this fierce grace. It was a thing that I wouldn't sign up for, and I would not give to any of my worst enemies, but I look back on almost fondly, and I'm thankful for it, and it's a beautiful thing. And I've been through all kinds of death, you know, divorce, all kinds of different things. I've got my fair share. And most of it, there's maybe some stuff I'm still I'd rather not be working through right now or whatever. But most of it, I look back and go, oh, that was the best thing ever. I'm so happy that happened. So glad. And people are like, oh, really? But I think there's an element of seeing that cycle. Do you find that in yourself? Is that something that you've become used to or look forward to? Or is there still a dread of this existential, like, oh God, what part of me is going to die today? Because it's a death and a rebirth, isn't it? It's that you have to die for that to be born, you know, for something new to come. Again, talk about ebb and flow and whatever it is, right?
Yes,
no one wants to die, generally speaking, I feel like.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I love that so much. And I mean, the answer is honestly is kind of both at different times. I would say in general, yes, and that's another great thing that Katie offers, the work of Katie, is you eventually say, so it's like, if your belief is, my mother betrayed me, then you do the work. Is that true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? How do I feel when I believe that? And how would it feel, or how would I react differently if I let that go? And then you turn it around. I betrayed me. I betrayed my mother. And then the real part that I love is like, I look forward to my mother betraying me, or like I look forward to, and the reason why is because it's an opportunity again to, like you said, like see the crack, see the window of opportunity there. And so, yes, the more I go through this, the more I recognize that this is, as my husband would say, this is where the juice is. Like, this is it. All the most beautiful things that life has to offer comes from the death and the pain and the suffering, and making your way through that. And like, again, we see that in nature. We need death. We need the decomposing animal's bones to then create a tree or a garden or whatever. I mean, this is, if like, make no mistake, you belong here. We are at home here. So we're part of the same system. We're not separate from it. And so with death comes new life. And there is a lot of hope to, when you're recognizing that you are in a stage of contraction or you are in a stage of dying, there is so much hope knowing that this leads to new life. That being said, sometimes when I am in it, I forget that, you know, or I used to say, like, because I had learned so much from my panic attacks or my depression, I was like, man, I wish I had handled it differently. Like, I wish I had an opportunity to handle it with the tools that I have now. And then it will come, not as extreme, and sometimes I can be like, okay, this is it. I know exactly what to do. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to settle my nervous system, to dive deeper, to listen to the cues of my body. And sometimes I do that and it's amazing. And sometimes I'm like, I can't remember.
Right.
I'm so deep in it. I can't remember that there is light. Like, I'm just in the darkness. So it is a practice. I mean, that's the thing. And life will give you plenty of opportunities to practice it. But the real gift of this, so for people who are going through, let's say, deconstructing their faith, and they're like chipping away at it, and they're like, there goes my whole identity, and there goes probably some of my family members and some of my loved ones and my community and my structure for understanding the world, and everything is leaving me.
Just sounds terrible. Even as you're saying it, I'm like, this is my day-to-day life of what I work with. I'm like, it does just sound awful, doesn't it? When you start listing it down, you're like, this is a horrible thing for people to be going through. Like, it's like,
yes.
Yeah, it's really
intense.
intense.
Make no mistake. We're not saying that that's not horrible.
No.
It is horrible, and your pain is real, and it is rough, and like, oh, just like good on you for going through, being willing to go into that dark cave. We're just saying that, like, that's not the end of the story. And but what the gift that offers is, okay, you're in this stage where everything is being stripped away. That's excellent, because you get to ask yourself the question, what remains? And who remains? Not like what remains. Well, I still like Kentucky Fried Chicken, or I don't know. Or like, it's not like your aspects of your personality that still remain. I guess that can also be a really beautiful question. But even beyond that, like, who is actually seeing all of these things being stripped away, and they are remaining unchanged. So that's your pure awareness. Like in trauma work, that's your wise self who is undamaged, who actually, I mean, and they're kind of finding like science to this too. So it's not just like a hooey theory. It's like there is a part of yourself who observes and sees everything, and it knows exactly what you need to heal. So really just trusting that there is an engine within you that is leading you. It's your, it's your inner voice. It's the thing that makes you leave a marriage that is not right, even though that means losing everybody that or being hated by people that you love, or it's the inner voice that's leading you, and it's the voice that's leading you into doing your trauma work. I believe for me, my wise self sensed the anxiety attacks that made me realize, holy shit, I have some stuff to look at. So yeah, it's really tough, but it's not wasted. It's very useful.
Yeah. That's so good. I have I live with chronic pain, and a lot of the overlaps in this are so fascinating, because chronic pain isn't linked to physical injury anymore. Usually the physical injury is healed, or if the physical injury isn't healed, typically the body can't feel pain after several months of the injury. The body just starts to go, no point in listening to that. It's not getting better. And so it should stop feeling pain. But what happens is the neurons that are firing, the whole thing of like, if they fire together, they wire together. And so what happens to me is I got pain in my hands and my wrists. And I think years and years ago, I probably had RSI from like writing all the time. I was a writer and I did IT, and I was just always on a computer, on a laptop, probably like in some stupid position or something that like, like was bad for my tendons, and I got injured. And so my brain goes, oh, every time Phil starts to type, give him some pain to tell him, Phil, stop doing that, you idiot, you're hurt, right? And so obvious. And then over time, I stopped doing it. I do it less and less, and my body heals up. But the problem is that because it's fired together for so long, when Phil uses his hands, tell him he's in pain, that now it's healed. I still, 10 years later, healed up, MRIs, everything, no structural damage at all, still feel pain all the time when I'm using my hands for loads of different things. It's very, very frustrating. But the science behind it is fascinating, because it very much is, you need to tell your body you feel safe, acknowledge your pain and say, hey, thank you. I appreciate you're trying to warn me that there's danger, but actually there isn't danger right now. I really appreciate you looking after my body. You're taking care of me. You're trying to keep me safe. Thank you. Yeah. Like moving on, a lot of the meditative practices that go in with it are very much like, hey, let's look at the pain. Where is the pain? What's happening? It's observing this pain, and you realize, oh, actually I have pain in my hands. What does that mean? Right? When you actually like, is it here or is it here? Like where about in your hand? And then you go, oh, actually kind of moves. And so, so it isn't just like one bit that's sore, all these kind of things go on. But it's so fascinating, the overlaps between that, of this trauma, of your body having stuff going on, and it's going, hey, I am sending you some form of pain, and I'm going, hey, it sucks. I want you to realize how much this sucks right now. And you go, why does everything suck? And it's like, okay, good, I've got your attention. Right.
Yes.
So what we're going to do now is have a bit of a conversation. It's because your mother like did this and you didn't process it very well. And you need to kind of think about that and what it means, and let it go. And once you let it go, like, I won't have to give you this reminder, And so what's fascinating is it's the same in pain. A lot of people find their freedom from their pain by dealing with all kinds of different emotions, because so one of the things that I'm really intrigued by, that I'm rubbish at, but is the emotions that are going on at the same time as your physical injury and the pain. So it all gets wired in together as well. So then you go, well, I'm not using my hands, and I have an injury, but I'm using my hands and I'm still dealing with the problem of going through a divorce that I went through while I had the injury. So now when something comes up where, I feel rejected, my wife doesn't care about me, my whatever, right? Who knows what kind of weird ego trip we have today. That results in then me feeling pain or whatever it is. It might be stress, it might be anxiety. It's all kind of the same kettle of fish, where the body is kind of trying to give you these kind of like, hey, Phil, pay attention. I'm trying to tell you something. And yet we just kind of go, I feel pain right now. I'm just going to go to bed, or I'll take a bunch of like Nurofen or whatever. Or I feel stressed right now. I'm just going to stay inside. I'm going to watch a bunch of Netflix and just not talk to anyone. And like that, I'll be fine tomorrow. And in both cases, we're not doing the work, right? We're not actually
Yeah,
going, what is my body trying to lead me to?
that's
It's so
right.
fascinating, but we do it
Wow.
all the time.
I've never heard of anybody comparing those two, the chronic pain and the trauma. And I mean, it's more than overlap. It's exactly the same thing.
Right, it feels like it. I just don't want to go too far to say that. But
Yeah, that is, I mean, it's because trauma is just pain in a different way, you know, it's just intense emotions and that kind of pain. But like, wow, that's blowing my mind. And also, as you're saying that, I hope people can get to this point, if not right now, as they're working with their bodies, because I don't know if I was always this way, but like I'm listening to that being like, oh, it just makes me want to like hug and thank my body, because what an intricate system. And it's trying to protect me. It's trying to protect you. There's love behind it. Like it is trying to nurture and protect. It's like an overprotective mother. That's how we've come to know it in our family. Like it means well. It just needs a little bit of reassuring, like, hey, I'm an adult.
Right.
I can do this. And actually we can grow past this. You don't have to have this role anymore. But it is trying to take on that role because it worked. It worked at one point. So you can always, anytime pain is showing up in any way, you can use it as the portal to get to a place of compassion for yourself and for your body, because you can even follow it to like, okay, when did that work? And wow, thank you so much for, because there is so much of this work is like you mentioned, it's starting to nurture yourself through this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why resistance doesn't work. You have to actually let it be seen and tell you what it's trying to tell you. And then you can communicate back to it, but with compassion. It has to be with compassion. And the way you access that compassion is finding that time that it did that and it worked. Wow, thank you. I see how you have served me in the past, and you can relax. Or I like to tell usually my strategic mind, because it's like the most controlling. I like to tell it like, oh, wow, you're really trying to organize everything for me. Thank you. You don't have to carry this load all on your own. Like we have a lot of other systems in place and a lot of different parts and different voices. Like you don't have to do this by yourself,
Oh gosh, I need to tell myself that for sure. I really do. And do you know what's really interesting about that as well? In chronic pain, so fascinating. So in Manchester, we actually have a really amazing chronic pain kind of unit, one of the best in the UK, and they have 18 full-time staff members, and one of them is a nurse. None of them are medical doctors. The rest are psychologists, because this is psychological work. But what's really interesting is the number one thing that they put people on, I've been on one myself, is they do group workshops for self-compassion. And they found one of the major stumbling blocks. The reason that most people get injury, get pain, recover, pain goes, they move on with their life, right? 9 times out of 10, everyone does this. But we get stuck, we get caught up, whatever it is. And one of the number one correlating factors is if you're someone that doesn't show yourself self-compassion, if you beat yourself up, if you catastrophize and you attack yourself and you go, oh, you feel you idiot, you're like you use your hands during your pain again, or you answered the phone when your mom called and now you're stressed, you're an idiot, why did you do it, not to talk to your mom like when you're trying to get work done, or whatever it is, we kind of beat ourselves up. But actually these are kind of the main kind of issues that kind of just fan flames of fire. And so it's like talking of self-compassion as you do there, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Again, this kind of overlap of like, that makes a lot of sense. We have to learn to be more compassionate to ourselves. And what's interesting, I think this is what one of the interesting components of coming out of maybe a system of religion like Christianity, as a lot of people do, is It's fascinating because the undergirding of Christianity is this kind of grace, this compassion, this like,
Mm-hmm.
component, but we're not the most kind of self-compassionate group. We do kind of, we've been kind of hammered into us. You're supposed to beat the crap out of yourself. You're supposed to think about where did I screw up and how do I, repent and get better. It's not about compassionately going, oh, well, of course I did that. Like, how else could I do differently? Like, I'm a
Yeah.
teenager. How else would I do? What else would I do when I saw a pretty lady on my computer?
Right.
Right. Or whatever
Yes,
it is, right?
of
Christians
course.
spend their whole time doing. And then we
Yeah.
don't look through it through a lens of self-compassion. We don't go, oh, okay, this is what happens when I'm growing up and I'm a teenager. Of course I'm masturbating like 8 times a day as a 14-year-old boy. When the
Yeah.
internet came
So
out
is everyone.
just at that time, I was like the worst, like, prepared. But like, instead of going, oh, of course, that's understandable. You don't have that compassionate voice teaching you either, coming from leaders or anything like that. You've got this condemnation, and so you internalize the condemnation, and all you're doing is compounding trauma on trauma on trauma. This is a parallel I definitely see between me and Pete, especially reading his book. And anytime he talks about this, right, I'm like, this is like, I had no relationship with God without a lens of somewhere being, oh my God, when did I last masturbate? Is God displeased with me? Like, have I since made some sort of like recompense where I've done something good enough to then talk to God to ask him to forgive me? I have to like even like fill in the gap somewhere. Like, everything with God was sexual for me. And I didn't even know girls at this point, like, I mean, I've not even got to sex yet, I mean, it's all sex,
No,
so
I'm
it's
with
just so fascinating how we traumatize ourselves in a lot of ways because we have that non-compassionate voice. So Val, I am really intrigued, and I don't know how personally you want to go, but I'd be really intrigued if you could tell us a bit about your journey of how did you become Val, the person who is embodied and enjoying going on that journey to be more embodied, more minutes of the day. Where did you start out? I'm assuming you didn't start embodied, or maybe you started embodied and then lost it and then came back.
Yeah, that's really smart, actually. Yes,
journey,
I think that's it. I think that we all started that way. I mean, my 2-year-old daughter is the most embodied person that I know. And yes, I think you really touched on something there where, through religion, or often through Christianity, I'll say, in fact, we're watching Transparent. I don't know if you've seen that show.
It's to watch lists, but unfortunately it's on my wife's watch list as well. And so when there's this crossover, it just takes months for us to get, because we've got a list of things that we both want to watch that is so long, and then these little side lists. And as soon as we're both want to watch, I'm like, damn it, I wish she wasn't so like interested in the same things as me, which is not true at all, right?
Right, of course. Yes, no, we're very familiar with that. Like, I have my shows that I watch without him. He has his shows that he watches without me.
And the betrayal when another person watches something on your list. We were going to do that together. Like, how could you do this to me?
He just did that with Social Dilemma. I was doing the dishes and I heard, while the baby was napping, and I heard like something about Instagram or whatever. And I was like, is that Social Dilemma?
That better be the trailer as you're flicking through Netflix to get to something else.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, all I was trying to say about Transparent is that it's like, it has, I mean, I think it's just as much about Judaism as it is about like gender identity. Wow. And it's so beautiful. We were just talking about how in general, it seems like the Jewish faith doesn't have the same body issues that Christianity does. And so, yes, like, I just wanted to really quickly address what you said because it was so smart, and then I'm happy to get into my journey. But yeah, if the framework that you were raised with, which if you were raised in a Christian evangelical Protestant, that's all I can really speak to. Chances are you were kind of told like, you are kind of like a sinful beast. And like God is so compassionate and grace, like, and full of grace for you, that he loves you anyway, you disgusting animal. You know? And it's the opposite of trusting your body. You have to deny.
Not trustworthy at all. The heart is evil beyond, measure. There's also like, your heart is good. It's like, how we pick and choose, but we always pick the bad ones, right? We never do the good stuff.
Yeah, well, because it's fear-based and you really don't want to mess this up because it's the worst consequence. It's hell for eternity. So you're going to err on the side of I'm going to be as good as I can be.
Yeah, you're like, how many trillions of years? Yeah, okay, I'll play it safe.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that I'm bad and I'll try to be good. So of course that's something that I lost and something that I'm only now relearning. But as I'm relearning it, I am remembering it because you have it as a child. You know, depending on what has happened to you, you might have even lost it before you can remember. Luckily, I think I had a few good years of being embodied before I completely lost it. But yeah, so I am, my parents are still evangelical pastors.
Okay. Yes, me too.
Yes, you too?
Yeah,
oh my gosh. What flavor?
Well, it's weird because in the UK it's a bit different, right? Because my dad is a Baptist pastor, but Baptist means like it can be so diverse. So he actually like got saved in this like Pentecostal meeting. He was in the Navy. He was like a woman in every port. He was a DJ. He was like super crazy, but he had like a stomach ulcer because he was an alcoholic. It was like insane backstory. You know how you're always right. You grew up in the church, right? So you don't have the amazing before after story that you'd always be like, fuck this guy. Like, what is his story? Right. You know, he's just like, oh yeah, I got saved like 18 times every year. And like, cause I was just trying to cover my bases and that's it. But like, he has that story. He got healed in this meeting. He didn't even believe in God. He just showed up. He went because like his superior officer asked him and he was like, oh God, this is too awkward. I guess I'll go. Which is funny because his superior officer, as Christians, look from the outside is probably thinking, oh crap, I asked this guy and what if he doesn't go? And what if he thinks about it? Right. So everyone's
right. Yeah.
But he goes and he gets like this crazy healing and like completely healed on the spot of his stomach ulcer, like never touches alcohol again, like crazy. So he but then he went to like this like Baptist like home group that was like in the port he was at, and like just that was the only Christians he knew. So he went there, and they were quite conservative and whatever. But he ended up being this kind of like charismatic Baptist. So it was a real mesh of like different realities, and that's what I grew up in. Like is like very charismatic, but like basically all the churches we had average age 60, which when you're like 10, average age could be 3,000. But I mean, 60, what is that? I mean, that is not any level. Like, my parents are unrelatable weirdos and they're like 25, so it's funny looking back. And I'm like, oh my God, I was my dad at like the end of his ministry. I'm like, this is crazy how old they were. Not old at all. They were young.
Oh yeah.
So it's a weird one.
I'm so with you. That is like very similar because so my grandpa is a pastor. I mean, he's retired now, but he was a pastor of like a Pentecostal Church of God, like Holy Roller church in Arkansas that had like 12 people.
Amazing.
And like my grandma would teach the Sunday school and he was the pastor, and it was like the wooden pews and people literally like running around clucking like chickens, and my brother and I like having like church laughter, trying not to laugh. And then my dad really in a very bold move took his family and moved to California and started they became Foursquare, which here is like has like a charismatic, but it's throughout the years, like the person who started it is really
Amy
cool. Her
name
is
Yes. By the way, I've never felt so good on my church history. I just heard a freaking touchdown. Okay, good. We don't even have Foursquare in the UK either, which is like so impressive. I lived in California for 4 years. I come across these guys. So,
oh my gosh. But that's so funny. Seriously, I am blown away. I mean, no one, even in the
She's
States,
crazy though, but she was one that was like, she would like do like, she was actor or something, right? And she was like, do these crazy performances from the stage and like, right.
Yes. She was like the Stevie Nicks of the Christian world. She would like she would wear the same like wings and like float down the stairs and like but she would heal people, and she started the Dream Center in LA, which fed more people during the Great Depression than the government did. Like, it was like, she did a lot of really great work, but she also like disappeared for a little while, and like had some husbands, had some affairs, like just had like a
disappear for a while and just, you know, accumulate a few husbands. It's fine.
Yeah, it's like fine. Yes.
And you're wearing wings, for God's sake. At a certain point, if you're wearing wings, there's like a slight element of like, you know, you can't be questioned. You know, at a certain point, this person is basically an angel.
Yeah.
Do we want to be smoked? You know?
Yeah. And especially if you're doing good in the world, you're like, all right, well, however she's doing it. I actually identify more with Amy than I do with anything else about Foursquare. Like, she's the thing that I like about it. I'm like, yeah, she was kind of badass. But anyway, so that was huge. I mean, my dad, the leap from that tiny church in Arkansas being very like, women don't wear pants, you don't wear makeup, you don't do any recreation. He couldn't go bowling, swimming, skating. Like, all of it was a sin because it's pleasure, I guess. I don't know. So he came from that. And I often think about this, the leap from that to where he is now is, even though he's still a pastor, it is catastrophically huger than the leap that I've made from him to where I am now.
Wow.
Like, I mean, it was like an impossible situation to leave, and he did it. So that was like his own hero's journey. And then
he would have like halved your grandpa's like church population as well, right? Just by leaving with bringing the kids with him. So it's like some serious ramifications.
Yeah, it's a serious betrayal. Yeah. I mean, I also left a small town because I got divorced and left. And even without the religious element, your community feels betrayed. If it's like a very small, tight-knit community, it's like, I always say that have you seen the movie Big Fish?
Oh my God, it's my favorite movie ever. I say that about quite a few movies. I will like to the side.
Yeah, sure.
I say Tim Burton, Big Fish, greatest movie, so beautiful, encapsulated. It's what I use all the time. My wife complains all the time because I never tell the truth and I always embellish everything, because why would you ever limit reality? I'm making this up as I go anyway. I might as well add some good stuff to it, right?
I'm so on board with that.
Right, anyway, Big Fish.
Yeah. So it's like Spectre, right? That like beautiful place that's like wonderful in heaven. And then as soon as he's like wanting to leave to continue his journey, they're like, why would you leave? Yeah, don't leave. That's like, that metaphor comes up so often because it's the hero's journey. And the first thing is you have to leave the village, and like the villagers are going to do everything they can to keep you or to make you feel crazy, because you're threatening their own.
Right. They don't want to leave the village.
They don't want to leave the village. And if you leave, they have to kind of acknowledge that there is a world outside of the village, which kind of like fundamentally breaks down probably their entire belief system.
Right. Or at least the illusion that this is perfect. Right?
Yeah.
Because if this is good for you, or so at the very least, we have to somehow demonize what happens next for you. We create a whole narrative of like, oh, they left. Oh yeah, but did you see that they got divorced? Or, oh, did you see they started sleeping with someone? Or, you know, they started whatever it is. Like, this is this is why you stay in. Don't do that.
Yep.
That's what hangs a lot of people at Deconstruct is they've been inside and thought those things and said those things as the group about people that leave. So now they've left, they've got that narrative in going, I know exactly what everyone's saying about me because it's what I said about them.
That's right.
Before they left, you know?
That's right.
It's crazy though.
No, that's totally right. And I've experienced that for sure. And it is like a system that's really smart. I don't know if they're trying to be this manipulative, but one of the things that I still work on, it's like a pattern that I developed from my Christian days, is like the slippery slope. Like you said, like it's the slippery slope mentality. Yeah. That is just like got the Christian trademark on on it. Like the
Big
idea
time.
of, okay, well, if I stop going to church, then I'm going to stop believing in God, and then I'm going to have sex with everybody that I see, and then I'm
Yeah.
going to get an STD, then I'm going to become an alcoholic, and I'm going to like end up in jail, you know.
Right.
And you still, I still will catch myself doing like this slippery slope thing.
Mm.
But if it's such a good design, because if they tell you that as a kid, then if you even start following one of the steps where you're like, well, then I'm leaving the church. Okay, look, I guess I did get a divorce. Yeah, because I realized that I was unhappy and I only got married because that's what the church wanted me to do. Holy shit, I'm on this trajectory.
Yeah,
What's going to happen next? You know, and then usually if you play it out, you find that it doesn't go necessarily that way.
Sure, at
But
all. Or necessarily, there's just once you take you've taken a few steps forward, and you can look back on the slippery slope, right? You realize it's like a looped up slip and slide. But
yeah,
you know, you look back and you realize, oh, my duality, my right and wrong, my judgments, my moralizing of this whole process. You realize, oh, from the inside, was able to look at every person that left that maybe got a divorce or slept with someone, and I was like, oh, well, divorce and sleeping with people, that's bad, that's evil. Getting pregnant,
right.
evil. Like whatever, like STDs,
Yeah.
evil. To be fair, I'm not saying anyone should particularly get STDs or relish in that. So just
Sure.
but
Yeah.
when you come out the other side, you go, oh, actually, no, my divorce wouldn't sign anyone else up for it. But generally speaking, it's a fairly amicable one. And honestly, the best thing that ever happened in my life. Honestly, I really think that maybe aside from, and this is a really crazy thing to say, and I'm really sorry to my family if anyone's listening to this, but I'd say that my mother dying is probably the best thing that ever happened. I had an amazing relationship with my mom. She's the best person I've ever known. I absolutely love her. I miss her every day. But actually, probably the fiercest grace, right? So again, like in a Christian circle, we look at certain things and we go, oh, that's good, that's bad. And so it's really easy to go, yeah, there it is, and there it is, and there it is, and there it is. But when you're on the outside and you're growing and you're learning, and you're like, wow, yeah, they're going to have some ammunition on me, but actually these are good things, It's
yes.
like, but that need for people not to have the ammunition, that need for that narrative, that need not to be seen as on the slippery slope or to validate myself. See, I am doing something right. We then go, oh, maybe I shouldn't leave my partner who's really abusive. And it's like, wait, what's happening right now? Because that's seen as bad, because that might be me on the slippery slope, or we're so caught in that trap. And I think that's a real part of it as well. I don't know if it's intentional and manipulative or just part of the evolution of groups and how groups function. Maybe it's certain psychological stages, that very traditional stage. If you're familiar with Ken Wilber or spiral dynamics and that sort of stuff like that, traditional blue, like
of course,
we're all here, part of the group, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Leaving Spectre is blue to orange, right? It's going, I could be my own person. I need to go and do my own journey and explore and be.
Wow. Yes, that's really well said. Wow. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And there, just like we can access compassion for parts of our body that are trying to protect us, you can, and maybe people aren't here yet in their journey, but like, it's like the transcend and include, you can access compassion for the people who did do that slippery slope to truly believing that they were protecting you. Like they really were trying to protect you the way that they felt like they were protected within this kind of narrower view. So yeah, there is often good intentions behind that. But yeah, so raised as a Christian, in the church, like, I mean, at least 3 times a week at church. I didn't do any extracurriculars as a kid because it was all church. Like I sang in the church and I babysat and did the nursery. And like, so I was just like singing and raising kids in the church. And loved the community of it, like really felt like, I mean, it was all just soaked in love for the most part. So like, I really have such fond memories of like feeling so connected to God and feeling very loved by God and loved and supported by the community. And And now that I have enough distance from it, I can look back on that upbringing for the most part with fondness. That being said, there of course there is trauma from it, of like, I mean, I remember we had a home group and everybody told their stories of like run-ins with demons, like different times that they like saw demons or were possessed by demons or something. And I was like 8. I mean, and that stayed with me.
You hadn't had any demon run-ins by 8? Come on, Val. What are you up to? Come on.
It was like, well, I guess
higher levels. You've not got any of the high devils yet.
Yeah. No one was like, maybe the 8-year-old shouldn't hear these terrifying ghost stories.
Yeah, terrifying demons that are out to get you and ruin your life and kill you and send you to hell.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, are everywhere and you can't see them, but they're everywhere. Yeah. And actually, you might see them at some point. Good luck.
Right. And my mom used to say, yeah, I don't know if this was just like a Pentecostal thing, but my parent, when I would like, so of course I didn't sleep for years and years. I had such trouble falling asleep because I was so scared. And I remember my dad trying to comfort me by saying, when we bought this house, I walked around the perimeter and like asked that there be an angel, angels surrounding this house. So he was like, so the demons can't get in here. They can press their faces up against the window, but they can't get in. And I was like, well, Yay! Of course, that's all I'm picturing now is just demons like.
It's like behind the curtains, you're just like, I do not want to open this curtain. No, let's just leave that closed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there is a lot of fear. I mean, still I will catch myself in that's like what you said about like when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're in such this fragile state that you usually are identified with your child self. And I will be like, what was that? And it's not that I think that they're demons, but I certainly am just like, I have this like nighttime fear that still kind of comes up from that. Wow. So there's trauma there. There's trauma with the body, of course. That I'm reconciling with sexuality that I had to do a lot of work around.
Was your church really into the whole like purity culture, purity rings, all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. And I got married when I was 20 to the only person that I had dated, that I had like kissed. We waited till marriage. We hadn't had sex. I mean, we really pushed the boundaries there, but like everybody we knew
that,
was
right?
Doing that.
It's like ridiculous. Yeah. Someone should bring out a really honest evangelical like guidebook of like, okay, right, here's the deal. Here's all the lines you're gonna break. So like, here's the section on like hand jobs, blow jobs, maybe some
exactly.
like like whatever.
Just anything except for
remember that whole story about like the Christian camp where kids were trying anal and you were like, that's a massive like amount of mental gymnastics here to be doing.
Oh my God. And you will do it because you're denying, you're denying the serious desire that you had. But Pete actually used to have a great bit about that where it was something like, he was like, I went to a Christian college and some people there would not, they were waiting till marriage to have sex, but they would have anal, as if God was looking down there being like, wait a minute. Oh,
no, it's the bum.
It's in the butt. Okay. Oh, okay. You sneak. You found the loophole. You found the literal loophole.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And actually I will say, like, this is not at all what the purity culture wanted, but I am like, there was nothing more arousing than like being parked in a car somewhere, like dry humping, making out, never like knowing that you can't really go much further than that. So you have just intense sexual tension. Like it was like
prohibition. Camping. That's it, man. It's the best, right?
It's the best. Yeah. In my marriage, we're just trying to recreate that tension.
Right.
Like that is the hottest thing ever is to tell somebody that you like can't go further than this point,
But that's like from birth, we're wired that way. We are literally wired of like, you know, you can leave most things in a room and that's fine, but you put the thing in the room and you say to your kid, you can play with anything, but not that toy. They are dying, right? It's like these videos they have of the, you know, the little the candy or whatever, and they have
the marshmallows,
and they're like, all right, nobody eat this one like M&M, and you can have a whole bag of M&Ms, and they leave for like 12 seconds or something. You know, it's not even long, and the kids are like, I didn't eat it, I just licked it, you know, and the next thing you know, like they've eaten it like immediately, and it's just every time, because that's what that's what we're doing with sexuality, right? This like we're almost like creating this, and I think most teenagers would be quite tempted nonetheless. Like I don't think that somehow creating temptation that isn't there for regular normal teenagers, but there's no natural progression of intimacy on a physical level. You're gonna have a lot of intimacy developed on a very emotional level, maybe even more so than most kind of relationships, because Christians are really intentional in a lot of ways about that stuff. They teach really well about a lot of relationship emotional stuff, like doing deep spiritual work, and you're doing this with a partner, but you can't respond, so you're like growing crazily on intimacy, like emotionally, spiritually with each other. And like, it's like, all right, can we move up? No, not at all.
Right.
Okay. Like we're going to move up anyway. Right. But then you're
because it doesn't,
and then you're feeling guilty, and then you're having to deal with like, oh yeah, now every time I orgasm as a married person that's happy and legal, everything's good. God's good. But now every time I orgasm, I feel the guilt of having like 5 million orgasms watching porn. Right. Wired together, fire together, right? Every time I orgasm, I feel the shittest human ever, right? And they change, like the day of like, you know, you got married, or crazy stuff, right?
Oh my gosh, that's so well said. And you even helped me remember. So that's hope for anybody that's going through this, is that like I had even forgotten that was a phase where like I didn't understand why after I had an orgasm I would feel so sad. I would just feel really sad, like really down. And I was like, everybody says that this is the best and it feels good for a second, and then I just feel so sad. And it's like, I wish I could go back in time. And
like,
that's right. Yeah. Well, it's missing that body part. So that's so smart. And I've never heard anybody explain it that way, where like your intimacy is growing and growing and growing. And we just have this natural, our bodies are supposed to be part of that.
Yeah.
And what they're doing without realizing is they are kind of separating the intimacy with the body's reactions, as opposed to teaching that these things go hand in hand. And my friend is Croatian, and she was just telling me that she was like in Croatia or in Europe often. I don't know. She was just saying Croatia, so I don't know where it is. But she's like, the sex ed is relational. Like they teach it starting at 4. You teach consent basically, and then you just are teaching that like eye contact and relationship and being close, and that we need each other and all of these things. And then if you have a culture that's also putting in the embodiment piece, and you have those two working together, she's like, on average, people in the United States start having sex 2 years earlier than people in Europe, because we just teach plumbing, like you're this machine. And then we teach don't do it. Or if you're going to do it, here's contraception. But none of the actual parts that are complicated about sex. You know what I mean? No. So people are betraying their bodies. They are not connecting. They're disassociating. I mean, we have so many people here that the mind-body connection doesn't exist. So how, of course, do you think that's going to affect your sex life? Like, you're not going to be in your body when you're having sex, which means that you are not there for the other person. Right. So you're like basically masturbating into somebody. Like you're not, it's just you're in your own world, you know? So I feel like that really is like somebody asked on the podcast, actually on our podcast, we take questions, and somebody asked us how we intend to teach our daughter about sex. And I loved that question because it really gave me an opportunity to think about it. And it feels like truly reparenting my child self in this, where I just want her to have a attuned sense of her own body, to have the like connection with her own body, which really is at this point just trying to protect that because she naturally has that.
Sure.
And I want her to know that like her body will tell her when she's ready. Her body will tell her if she's not safe, if she's not being respected, if it's not the right time, and just to like listen to her own body and to not settle for anything, but the ultimate point of sex is connection. So to not settle. If the person is not there, you don't have to give yourself to this person who's not showing up for you, you know? So, I mean, that's something that I've learned in the last 8 years. And I hope that I can raise somebody who like, that's just always been her idea of sex, you know?
Absolutely. God, I think of that. I mean, I talked about how hung up on like sex. That was a big thing. That was probably a major component of my first marriage falling apart, was like, I just was, I mean, on so many levels, I was really unhealthy, like words can't describe.
Yeah.
And it takes two people to like fail things. And like, you know, there was obviously loads of components there, but the biggest part for me, because I can't take responsibility for anything else, I can only take responsibility for myself. I'm like, man, like a huge part of it was like, I just like, yeah, I was in my head. I wasn't aware of my body. I wasn't able to be embodied. I was second guessing everything. I had so much guilt and shame around sex and all that kind of stuff. And not only that, I hadn't learned that like basically women weren't objects at this point. Like, I mean, that was still getting hammered into me at like 23, 24, 20, whatever. Like you can't be around a woman without being like, I don't know, impregnating them nonstop. I was like, dude, I've lived 25 years. I've not managed to get anyone to sleep with me, you know, like not quite, but you know, it's like I'm pretty safe. I feel like most women are safe with me. It's fine. Like, but it's just like, you know, just so many hangups, not allowing my wife to be herself because I, on some level, was basically doing what most Christians do, treating women like objects, like possessions, right? So I would get possessed. Oh gosh, my wife is going out today and she's not wearing a bra, and that means other people will like whatever. And it's like, who gives a fuck, right? Now I'm like, now I'm the opposite. My wife's like, you know, COVID. She's like, oh, it's so great. I've not worn a bra for like 6 months or whatever. And now we're like occasionally going out or whatever. She's like, oh, I hate wearing a bra. I'm like, don't wear a bra. That's amazing. If you don't want to wear a bra, don't wear a bra. And then, you know, I'm like, but if you want to wear a bra, you know, you do you. Like, I mean, I'm not telling you, but like, I'm like, this is great. And so just seeing those shifts in learning to, and I'm like, God, what will it be like? I said this to Stephen Mitchell. I was like, oh my God, like how excited am I to have kids that I can do the work with from a young age, right?
Oh yeah,
like, that absolutely is exciting to me. And I don't know, maybe we have to, you know, maybe the Richard Rohr kind of like build your life to have it all crash down and fall apart. Maybe we have to get a bit like egomaniac, build everything, screw up a bunch of stuff, build some stories that are false to then have it all fall apart. I don't know. I'm sure I'll do great at doing all that terrible stuff as well. Not terrible, but like essentially.
It'll happen either way.
So yeah, but wow.
Yeah, I love that. That is true. I think about that with parenting all the time is like Pete and I are working so hard to become nobody while we're raising this person who has to become somebody first, you know? So the only thing that I have there is like, just, we're going to be living examples of that, and we'll support her somebodyness. And she'll, once it comes time for the fall, like to use Richard Rohr's language, like once it's time for her to fall into the second half of life, she will have a reference for that because she will have seen us do it. But you can have, you know, you can have a fondness for I think he says that that's the raft, but it's not the shore, you know, like the first half of life is the raft. And of course you have compassion and fondness for that raft. It's like, it's how you got here, you know? But it's very, you were reminding me that like the role specifically for women too often was the purity keeper. So it was like, I remember, you know, like making out, and I knew like, well, we're told like, well, men can't stop,
Yeah.
They
Men can't
they
control
get
themselves. You cause them to stumble. You lead them into sin. Yeah.
That's right. Your dress had cleavage, so of course he's going to want to feel you up. It's not his fault. It's your job to like not be tempting, and it's your job to stop it
Yeah.
entirely. I mean, my parents were really good about a lot of things, even like masturbation and stuff. They were pretty on the like liberal side of that, but they did tell me that, and I know I'm, you know, they did the best that they could, but like that was ingrained that was my job. So I remember like making out with my then boyfriend and being like, I don't want to stop. Like, I don't want to stop, but I have to be the one that's like, okay, that's enough, you know?
It's
And
wild. But you know what's a weird part of that I always think of is that like, so women cause this and they are in some way responsible for the male who's completely an uncontrollable, like just penis with arms and legs, basically, you know, like, and, but at the same time, the man's in charge. And he's responsible, and he's a spiritual leader, and he knows best. And you've got this weird dynamic of like, so I'm responsible for helping you keep whatever, but at the same time, you're the one that's saying like, hey, follow my lead. And you're left in this impossible place as a woman, it feels. Like I've never been in that place, and so I'm glad we're not, but like it feels like looking on that only like, you know, 30 years later, not back then. I didn't notice that. But it feels like a very impossible place that people are put in. Val, I forgot to ask at the beginning, how are you for time? I really want to make sure we don't go too long.
I haven't even thought about time. I'm
are
great.
You good? Okay, because I want to hear the rest of your story, but I don't want to like also like, you know, have you leave this room and, you know, like little Leela's like 8 years old, or, you know.
No, we have a babysitter till noon. I mean, we're not going to have a 5-hour podcast.
No, not even. No, that's fine.
But I'm totally good. Yeah, okay. No worries.
So what happened next? So you are married. You've left this community. You then get divorced. So where was this your spirituality in all this? Like where did the cracks start to come in?
Great
when
question.
Did you get on the slippery slope?
I know when I get on that slippery slide. I got married at 20, and I was still like really in the world. And then I was going to college, and I was going to like a very liberal college.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember that started really kind of opening my mind to just the concept of, I am just the concept of conditioning, that your beliefs are often just a result of how you were raised and what you were told, and not necessarily anything more than that. So there was the window right there. And then I remember kind of the first step was me acknowledging like, if I was raised in India, I would be Hindu, you know, like
I would be going to hell, realistically.
Yeah. And what does that mean? Does that mean that this is still true, that this is still the only way? And so of course there was a period of time where I was like, yes, this still is the only way. And I would just have to trust that like Jesus would find me somehow.
Thank God I was born in the USA.
Yeah. I happened to stumble upon the only belief system that's right.
It's great. Yeah.
I was raised in it. Wow. What luck. And then it was so gradual for me. Not to say that it wasn't painful, but it's hard to like pinpoint. There was not a big boom of like everything got blown up. I do remember when I was 14, probably the most painful part was like my first wave of deconstruction. When I was 14, I had like a very intelligent friend who I loved, and he left the church like when he was 14 because he started to be like, Adam and Eve, wait a minute, this doesn't correlate with science. Like, do you really believe that? I mean, really like the 14-year-old version of it, but you're like, do you really believe there was a whale and a man in the belly and like whatever? And that was just the first time any of that had ever been questioned. And that led to like a 2-year, like a dark night of the soul where I felt like I wasn't hearing God. And it was the first tear in the fabric.
Yeah.
And I was 14. So like, it just wasn't the right time. Like it was too overwhelming.
Yeah.
It was too flooding.
Is that what eked you back in, the connection and, you know, that stability around you and stuff?
Definitely. I remember having a period of time where I was like, okay, I used to say like I was an atheist for a day, where I was like, I don't think this is real. Oh my God. And the darkness and the fear that came up, I now know like I just didn't have the resources or the support system to handle that. So I just was like, no. We can't look
Most
under
adults
that.
aren't ready for that. Never mind like being 14, 15. No, I'm good. Like, let's not go there.
Yeah.
I got a lot of shit happening in my body. I do not need that added.
Yeah. Already everything is like, feels like it's chaotic. I can't add the one thing that I'm using to like hold on to, you know? Yeah. But then once I was in college, I think kind of having that experience and feeling a little bit more like I was my own person outside of the community, outside of my parents, I was a little bit more open to considering it. So then from there, it was very gradual. And the big move was that I stopped going to my parents' church and I started going to a wonderful church called Catalyst in Humboldt County, shout out. That was a very like social justice minded. Right. And the person who was the pastor of that church at the time, we didn't realize this until hindsight, but like he was in the process of losing his faith. Like, wow. So he would give very like Robbellian sermons about like, you know, actually in this stage or in this scripture, sin is this Greek word, which actually means, you know, like separation and whatever. So he was really like deconstructing. Yeah. And so that happened really gradually where I was like, okay, at the very least, like, you know, like I love Jesus and I believe in God, but like everything else I'm not sure about. Mm-hmm. So I had that, I lived in that space for a while. And then I don't really know. It just gradually, like I said, it didn't feel that much like a tearing down as opposed to a revealing, that it's way more expansive than I thought. And so it felt like a relief. I mean, there was a huge relief element to being like, wait a minute, God is big enough to hold all of this, like to just have to hold everybody's journey, you know? And that was like, I could rest in that a little bit. It wasn't as rigid as I thought it was. It was like, I saw some flexibility in there. And that was a relief. So that happened probably around 21. And then I slowly just kind of stopped going to church, and feeling like I still had a spiritual connection. And then, my marriage just started kind of falling apart, not because of that, because he was also on the same journey. Actually, I feel really lucky that we were having like a parallel experience. But you just you're growing up and you start realizing
growing
that
and changing, right? Like you're not the 20-year-olds that like, it's crazy.
I mean, 20 years old. And really, I made the decision to marry him when I started dating him when I was 17, right? Because that's kind of what you're doing. Like
Joshua
you're not,
Harris model,
you're like,
right?
Exactly. You're courting. So I just, you know, it just started realizing like, wait a minute, the person who decided this didn't know herself at all. And I'm changing and growing and outgrowing. And, but leaving was the hardest thing. Wow. I mean, up until, it was definitely the hardest thing that I had gone through at that point, because it really did feel like I wasn't just divorcing this man. I was divorcing the entire community, and I was divorcing the version of me that existed before that, you know, like who I knew myself to be up until that point. I was divorcing her. Wow. and I literally had to move. I mean, I knew that there was no way to divorce without leaving Spectre entirely, because the community was so tight knit and connected, and I was the one that wanted to leave. Like, he didn't want it. So so I just couldn't handle. Another thing that I adopted from the Christian upbringing was this idea of everyone else knows better for me than I do.
Wow. Yeah.
So to make that decision to leave was me like slaying that dragon. Of course it still comes up, but like in general, I had to be like, whoa, I know everybody who I believe to be smarter than me and to be more righteous is telling me not to do this.
Exact opposite. Yeah.
But there is something in me that is telling me, I love the line from Eat, Pray, Love, where she says, the only thing more unimaginable than leaving was staying. And like, there was just this, I just got desperate enough that I was like, I actually I can't stay.
Yeah.
So I had to really face and luckily I found a good therapist at the time there that was like, who could know better for you than you?
Wow.
Like, you're in this body, and to a Christian,
it's so crazy that's just not a thought. Like, that's a profound, like, wow. And like, to most human beings, it's like, okay, that's just like a really shitty proverb. Like what? Like, you best. Yeah. Okay. Great advice, buddy. Like, you know what I mean? But for a Christian, it's like, everything has changed.
Yeah. That's right. Well, if you start by telling somebody that they can't trust their body and they can't even trust their own mind, then it's not really good news when you tell them, actually, you know what's best for you, or you are all there is. My brother, who I absolutely adore, went through a very similar deconstructing journey, but just did it like 5 years later. So he spent more time in it, and he spent more time as an adult defending it, which I think was a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know what it is, but he had that component a little bit more of like, I can't have it just be me, because I can't trust myself to know what's right and wrong. Yeah. And like, anybody who knows my brother is like, what? You are like the best person in the world. You can trust yourself. But it feels really scary if you've never trusted yourself, to be told you know best.
Yeah. Well, it's a communal gaslighting, right? I mean, it is literally an entire community saying what you're thinking, that little question you've got, that's not true. The truth is that marriage is God's institution. You should never dissolve it under any circumstances. You know, like your question, I don't care if you could be a better you, and that's not what this is about. This is about you being stable, not asking questions, continuing this exact same marriage, like whatever. And it's funny, I look back to my divorce, and my wife kind of woke up and was like, this is like, I love you. You love me, but this isn't healthy. This is like, two kind of okay buddies kind of hanging out. But like, it's nothing particularly like life-changing. We're not going to change the world here. Like, and neither of us are going to be the happiest selves. And I just wasn't in a place to do that. Like, I was like, no, I can't do this. There's no way I could let this fall apart. Like, I had people following me all over the world that were looking up to me as like a Christian kind of like whatever speaker. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, what will people say? And so for me, like, none of it, when I looked at it, all my things of like, why should this marriage stay the way it is? The thing of like, I love you, that was in there, but it was like the 8th answer. Do you know what I mean? Like, there was so many things. Like,
wow.
Actually, I really probably, looking back, I'm like, oh, and I am a much better, healthier, happier human because someone else was brave enough to do it. But like, I was like, from every angle, unable to see that. And I would never, well, not never, I'd have made that decision 5-10 years later. You know what I mean? Like,
eventually, yeah.
But it's just astonishing, like, how powerful that communal voice of and communal perspective, when you give over to it, or at least just give it enough of a platform to speak from, it really is able to hold you there, where you're like, I'm not enjoying this marriage, but we should definitely make it work. We should just keep at it and like just hope change. And I'm not saying, if people have a bad marriage and they absolutely, you can work on things and things get better. And like sometimes that, I'm
Sure.
not saying like every marriage, as soon as there's problems, you should get up and walk away, because all marriages have some heartache
Right.
problems every day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah, it's
absolutely.
huge, really huge. Sorry,
Right.
rabbit trail, but that's what I do.
No, I love that. And I really, I love the phrase communal gaslighting. I will absolutely, with your permission, adopt that.
Absolutely. I think I just made it up, but maybe I probably stole it from someone already. So
Yeah, I mean, that really is exactly right. And it feeds on our, feeds is such a sinister word, but like it really works with our biology, which is we are pack animals.
yeah,
We know that we need community to
yeah.
survive.
If I get
So
kicked out of
there's
this
that.
group, I'm going to starve.
Exactly. And so I need their approval because if they leave me, I'm done. And then you have, because of that, I just learned this, that guilt and shame are biologically programmed into us because that is our mechanism to tell us the group isn't going to like this.
Wow.
So like if you feel guilty about something or you feel shame about something, that's just your animal saying, oh no, people the pack isn't going to like us and then we will die. So
Wow.
as intuitive and intelligent as our bodies are, we have to also recognize that they are evolutionary animals. And that doesn't mean that they are bad or stupid. That just means that we work with our mind and body, right?
Yeah.
So that's the feature that the mind can, that's when you can invite the mind in and say like, okay, let's have a conversation with this part of me that feels guilty or shameful or feels literally. So people who are deconstructing or divorcing or whatever and leaving their community, if it feels like you're dying, that's because there is an animal inside of you that does that.
Significantly worried that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's supposed to do, is to keep you from doing that so that you don't die. And it's just a constant nurturing and conversation with yourself. I mean, I'm so one of those people now that like fully believes in talking to yourself. Like you should be talking to yourself way more than anybody else, with intentionality. I mean, we're always running the tape.
Right.
But
Yeah.
having intentional, loving, compassionate conversations with yourself. I mean, it takes doing that all throughout the day. Don't do it out loud. People might.
I've noticed myself doing this more out loud. I have, since starting to be really intentional with the work with Katie's stuff. I was walking back from the shops the other day. I decided to walk around to the shops, which I never do. I usually drive. And I was like, I'll walk. And I'm literally walking along the roads and I'm literally doing the work out loud. It was about the Rob stuff, right? It was like, Phil, what are you doing that? And I was like, I think now I look at it, I think I just look up to him a lot. I think I wanted Rob to like me. I'm like, oh, what a childish idea. Like, I don't really care if he likes me overly. Like, that's crazy. And then I turned around, there's someone behind me, and I was like, I've just been doing that out loud, haven't I? You know that moment where you're like, you realize, and I'm just like, oh shit. But then I'm like, oh, I want them to not think I'm a crazy person. And how many layers of this is this going to go? But it's so fascinating, like that. I've never thought of it like that, but you're so right. And I guess Brene Brown's stuff is so linked to that, the shame mechanisms and vulnerability and when you get it out in the open, when you tell the group and they go, no, I don't really care. And then you're like, oh, the shame's just gone. Because my shame was based on you caring. And if you don't care, now there's no shame. But it is this interesting thing of like, evolution is just such a beautiful mechanism that's helped us and saved us. Right? All these mechanisms to protect us from pain, suffering, death, whatever it is. And for hundreds of thousands of years, we've been doing exactly the same thing, and up until maybe 150 years ago, we were doing the same thing. We weren't even marrying people for love. We were marrying people because of connections as far as relationships and power and safety. And only about 150, 200 years ago, someone was like, can I marry someone I love instead of just whoever my parents pick or whoever I buy? And that's a revolutionary idea that the church, which is funny, we're against. The church was the strongest voice against marrying for love because they were like, well, everyone's just going to divorce if they marry for love because people fall out of love all the time. And they were kind of right on some level, but also that's also kind of a good progression. But you see the evolutions, but when you start to do the evolution of personal wellness and wholeness, the body just can't catch up when it's been doing something for hundreds of thousands of years. And suddenly we have these radical changes where realistically, up until a couple hundred years, it was a massive deal that you fit in with a group. You'd be dead otherwise.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I'll move out of Humboldt County. I'll get a flat.
Yeah.
I'll get a new job. Should be all right. I will be a bit crap for a while. I need to make some friends or, whatever. But like, I'll survive, right? But the body is sitting there going, Valerie, you're going to die. You are literally going to die. You will starve to death alone with a broken leg as the elements consume you. Like that's what your body is doing to you. It's like, it feels like we're just so set up for failure on some level with that component. We're fighting this mechanism that just, it's a little broken on some level, a bit like what we're talking about pain and trauma. It's like, thank you, but you're not really prepared for this world I'm trying to deal with right now.
Right.
Kind of screwing things up a little bit.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. It's so strange because it is like, I mean, that's so well put. And I constantly run into situations where my mind is like trying to drag my body, and my body is just like not ready. It's not there yet. And it is, it's just, I guess it sounds kind of condescending, but it is more like, now I have all these references with a baby, right? So like, I really kind of think of my body that way, where you're just like nurturing while also showing like let's look under the bed. There aren't monsters under here. And like it's constantly doing that. So but it doesn't work, because I've already tried. So let me just say, it doesn't work to think of the body as like you dumb Neanderthal, like just catch up already.
Would you evolve already? Just take a 20,000 year jump, would you?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, you're so dumb, and I've even had psychedelic trips like that where I'm like, oh, this like
so limited.
Yeah, like oh my God, it has to pee now. Oh God, it has to eat. And I feel like that's so indicative of how I was. It was so really shining a light on truly like what was running in the background of how I was thinking of my body. So, I mean, I'm working on this poem right now that is just like, like the first lines are like, this body is a haven, this body is a trap. Like it sometimes does feel like, well, wait a minute, is this body like love? Am I being hugged, or am I being like constrained, confined? Exactly. So I totally understand that. And every time I just steer it back towards nurturing, like you would a baby, towards being like, you, for thousands of years, this worked. Of course you are trying what worked for thousands of years. Thank you. Just that a piece alone, like thanking it, having compassion for it, it really softens everything. Just kind of, at least it might still be there, but like the edge isn't there. And you realize that your body's tendencies are not, so even the guilt and the shame, let's say, the guilt and the shame aren't the problem. The guilt and the shame just are, they're neutral. Yeah. It's your own stories about the guilt and the shame. It's you holding on to it. It's you believing it. It's not, it's just the clinging. It's not the like, the thing will come up and it will pass through you. Emotions in general are meant to last like 30 seconds to a minute.
Right. Wow.
And you really, again, you see that in toddlers. You're like, the other night, this was a big one. So it lasted like maybe 10 minutes, but she was like screaming, like she was possessed. We couldn't believe it. We kept looking at each other like, who is making that sound? It was like The Exorcist.
So
it was
funny.
Unbelievable. And then I was like, it was a night, and I was like, Leela, do you want to go see the stars? And she was like, yeah.
Oh man, I wish could I be that person? Could I
know.
Be my friend had a kid, and he embodied this so well. My friend Dan, And he was like anytime the kid would have a meltdown, I would stay with him when I was traveling and speaking in the States. He's up in New England, and he had this kid, and like literally every time he had a meltdown, he'd just be like, he just picks and he'd be like, watch this. And he's like, oh, wow, Nova, look out the window. There's a rabbit. And I'm like, it's not a rabbit. And she's like, it's gone. It just ran away. Like, but she's straight to the window and she's given up on her meltdown. And he's like, she's now excited. Now we're going to go outside and look for rabbits. And he's like, every time he's like, they are so easily to distract. He's like, they don't need to be upset for more than 2 or 3. Like, let them cry a bit if they need to, but like,
let them out.
Let's just distract them. Let's move on to something else. And I'm like,
that's right.
Am I doing that? Or am I burying my emotions? Am I distracting myself? I don't even know what the comparison is, but I feel like there's something in this of what I do. Like,
sure. And you can probably look at however your parents handled your tantrums to trace it back to how you're handling your emotions now. Because my mom would do that, but she didn't do the very important piece of like letting me let it out. Again, she's incredible and she did the best that she could, but she will like almost frantically look at the window, look at the, whatever. And so I realized I was still doing that in my 30s of like, if I'm feeling sad, to be like, watch
just become
TV,
manic,
eat something. Yeah. Just be like, just don't, no, shush. Like, don't look at it.
That's how I do everything.
And then there are,
feeling attacked.
Yeah, exactly. So really the like modern parenting, I mean, a lot of methods are you just sit with them in it and you let them feel it and experience and you give them language for it because they're all in their right brain. So they don't have the language. So you just say like, yes, you're really sad. You wanted to play with the phone and we can't. Oh, you're mad. You're really mad. I see that, and you feel kind of ridiculous for doing it, but then it's so important. And then this is where like modern parenting kind of diverts. Like some will tell you just do that until they have completely like are on the floor like,
post therapy,
like
therapy hangover.
Yes, until they've just totally worn themselves out. My therapist, who I really trust, who knows a ton about the nervous system, she's like, eventually they do get to a point where they might need you to help them out of something. Like they are just totally stuck and spiraling. So that's when it's really valuable to be like, hey, do you want to go see the stars? Do you want, but this is really aligned because I have found that, I mean, I've been doing this trauma work and this embodiment stuff pretty much starting when I got pregnant. So for the last 3 years, she's 2 now. And I was finding that the whole sitting in her tantrum was so aligned because why am I uncomfortable with that? There is the biological element of like, you are meant to respond when your baby cries. So that's the biology piece that we were talking about. And I am still making peace with my own intense emotions. So to have her have extreme intense emotions is just like, there's something to like my child self it's like breaking her brain because you're like, no, we were taught to just really avoid that at all costs and to allow to just sit and hold space. Nothing bad is happening. There is a pent up amount of energy in your body that needs to be released. Just let it release, so I really found it the more I would in therapy, a big part of the trauma work for me was nurturing my body. Like she would put pillows at my edges, put like a blanket over me. I like have like a palm stone that I'm always holding. And then I would just kind of let my body do what it wanted to do. But a lot of times it just wanted to like sob, like shoulder shaking sob. And it really did just feel like something was being released. It felt good. It was necessary. And the more I had that, my own references for that, the more I could see Leela's tantrums as the exact same thing.
Wow.
Like, we think that that is the scariest thing, to just like let yourself weep, but it's so healing. And it's not, I mean, for me, I will have it not regularly, but when I'm diving into trauma work or whatever, usually there's a week where kind of every day I'll just, it's common knowledge in our house now, I'll just come out of the bedroom and tell people, or I'll go into the bedroom and say, like, I need to have a release. Like, I just need to let this out, you know?
Don't come in if you hear me wailing.
Yeah. Exactly. If you hear me wailing, just let it happen. It's not anything interesting.
It's so huge.
Yeah.
I think of that a lot. Like, I really struggle to name my emotions. I have, so clinically it's called alexithymia, which is that you do not know how to name your emotions. So basically, in your hemispheres, you have the emotion on one side and you are able to label it and understand the emotion on the other. And in certain people, that there's no bridge between the two, or the bridge is damaged. And so it's really common in people that have autism. About 50% of people that are autistic can't name their emotions because that connection doesn't fire. The big question is, how much is it genetic and how much is it, you know, socially constructed? And they don't know. I mean, no one really knows. It's very hard to kind of get data on that. But I do know for me, we didn't, well, my memory's really bad as well. So you were talking earlier about, you know, like going back to your early, like, I can't remember last week, never mind like when I was 4. But I do think, looking back and seeing how my parents interacted, how they interacted with us, they were so amazing. Like, honestly, I wouldn't choose other parents. I just, you know, like, you look around and you're like, nope, I still want my parents. They were honestly amazing. Absolutely had their flaws, but so do I, you know, I mean, I still like me. But I didn't, you know, I don't think there was this thing of like, oh, I was sad, I could go to my parents and I would be like, I don't know what's going on, this is going on, and they'd be like, oh, it's okay, you feel sad, someone at school betrayed you, or, you know, like, that's rejection, that's betrayal, that's, you know, like, all these, and I just don't have that connection. And it's astonishing, like, to the point where, like I mentioned earlier, my wife will literally come up at the end of the day and go, how's your day going? I'm like, yeah, okay. And she's like, you don't look okay. And I'm like, oh, actually, I don't know. Like, yeah, I've got this thing in my chest. And she's like, you feel anxious or sad or rejected? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just my chest feels heavy. And then she'll tell me about your day, and I'll start, and I'll get to, like, you know, 11 p.m. and I'll be like, oh, someone I was trying to help, like, just snapped at me and went crazy and was yelling at me. And she's like, oh, do you think, and she's like, when did it start? And I'm like, oh, about that time. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, maybe, do you think, like, maybe you're a bit upset or hurt? And but I just I can only kind of retroactively kind of make those connections, and I'm getting better at closing that window, which I think is, you know, doing that work of, like, whatever it is, building that bridge. Or but how crazy it is, these, like, little simple things. And I don't hold it against my parents, because they were busy doing other things that made them amazing parents as well, you know, like, they were focused on whatever it was that they knew to do to make great impact on my life. But a little thing like that, not knowing, oh, how important it is to just sit with the child and go, oh, you're crying, why are you crying? This happened, oh, that must make you feel very afraid. Or, you know, like, just a really, again, I get excited. I think actually I'm gonna get a lot of healing watching my kid, teaching them how to name their emotions. I'll be like, oh, that's what I'm feeling as well. Oh, I feel sad. So a little bit selfish.
No, that's it. That is, I mean, that's not like a reason to have a kid, but no,
probably not.
It is one of the huge
silver lining
gifts that it gives you, is that there's so many parallels between parenting your child and reparenting your child's self. Like, it's very, very valuable. And I guess I want to say, because you were so nice to your parents, but I also feel that way about my parents. My parents were incredible, and a huge reason why my deconstruction went so smoothly, I mean, as smooth as it can go, because they laid such a deep foundation of like, truly what matters is love. Like, love is you can kind of tear everything else down. Love is what remains. And they showed incredible flexibility when I kind of changed my faith and got a divorce. Of course, that, like, made them kind of question everything. I mean, my poor mom, especially, who believed that God had told her that I was supposed to marry my husband. So like she now my divorce kind of results in her feeling betrayed by God. And I watched them really struggle with that and ultimately just return back to like, okay, the only thing I know is to love and serve people and to love my kids unconditionally. And so I feel so grateful that they did that. And I, like I said, I can look back on their parents and be like, whoa, you guys came so far.
Absolutely.
So like, I want to say that they definitely did like such a good job and the best that they could. But yeah, we didn't really have a lot of this information.
No,
It's
not at
still
all.
very new. And the thing that nobody was really doing for kids, except for maybe Mr. Rogers, was like, how did that make you feel? Where do you feel that in your body? What is your experience? And like, okay, you're sad. I'm gonna just let's sit here together and be sad. You know, like there was just no honoring of those emotions, and we didn't have the information. I also wanted to say, do you know Daniel Siegel? He's kind of a guy in the trauma world, but
I don't think so.
He also, sorry, I keep bumping my camera. He also is so I know him from parenting books, but then I just took this trauma summit that Sounds True did, and he gave a talk on trauma, and I realized he's just like a big person in the psychology world in general. Wow. But he teaches the same kinds of things, which is that integration method of like left brain, right brain. So I really recommend you could read any book, even the parenting books. And it sounds like your wife is kind of, and you are for yourself, but it sounds like your wife is doing exactly what you do.
I need to be really careful. Great. I don't get like weirdly codependent on it. Like I honestly, I'm like, I need to be careful. I don't turn you into some sort of like mother that's like teaching me my emotions, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, she teaches like really young kids as well. So like, I'm basically like this like 8-year-old kid crying in the playground, and she's like, what do you feel? You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's some weird stuff that I'm like, okay, this could go in a place where I just end up leaning on you all the time. So, but what a gift as well, because I do need to lean on quite often.
Absolutely.
So and you said pretty much all his books are great, but like, do you have like, if people are listening, like, what's your like, this is the one that just grabbed you, or you think it's entry?
I think actually a good entry is just going to his website and looking at the Wheel of Awareness. That's his concept. And I think that he has a lot of resources. So you don't even necessarily have to read a book. You can just go to his website and that will give you a good idea. And then you can look at whatever book. It depends. Like if you want a child's book, No Drama Discipline is incredible, or The Whole Brain Child is incredible. Like, I mean, I mostly know him from the parenting world, but you can also like look up lectures and stuff that he's given, and anything. He really makes this through line of integration and consciousness and everything. So for the Wheel of Awareness, it's taking like your sensations, your thoughts, your experiences, or something like that. But the important part is at the hub is pure awareness. Wow. So it goes back to that idea of like, you have a wise, undamaged self that you can practice identifying with, and then you can kind of see everything else way clearer, because the problem isn't your thoughts or your emotions or your trauma or your sensations. The problem is that you can get fully identified with those, and you forget who you truly are. You know?
So fascinating how all these kind of, it just feels like we're on the cusp of integrating a lot of spirituality with the soft and hard sciences, right? With kind of quantum mechanics and stuff like that. But like certainly the soft sciences of like, you know, psychoanalysts, you know, psychology, all this different stuff. like
Yeah.
it seems so interwoven with things like Zen and Buddhism, and like, I mean, Katie's stuff, like, I mean, it's just like, you're like, oh yes, it's so
Yes.
fascinating to me. It really is exciting.
It's so
Yeah.
exciting. And I felt the same way because as I was doing my trauma work, I kind of had compartmentalized that as different from my spiritual work. And
Mm,
once I found that there are countless psychologists that are also Buddhists or whatever, I was like, okay, I'm going to just take this as a sign that these are my guides and I'm on the
yeah.
right path because things are really connecting that I never thought would.
Yeah.
And that's mind, body, spirit, right? Like
Yeah.
we've had people telling us for centuries that those things are connected. Like, oh, when
So
are we going to
funny.
believe them?
Yeah, no, seriously, that's beautiful. So where do you see yourself? I mean, I'm always fighting off any labels, and so I'm not going to thrust upon you the requirement to label yourself, but is there traditions that you go, oh gosh, this feeds me so much more right now than anything else? Is there certain like spiritual paths, and traditions that you go, gosh, that's my jam right there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's very interesting because I don't know if I've found that purely in a tradition,
Mm,
but I certainly find teachers that I can tell I'm like, this is exactly what I need. So Eckhart Tolle,
mm,
Byron Katie, as we've mentioned, um, Richard Rohr, and I mean they're all from Ram Dass. So
yeah,
there you have like four
quite a
different kinds
mix,
of
right?
traditions. Yeah. And Pema Chodron, who I also love, has a great chapter of her book called like One Boat or something. And she says like you can kind of explore all these different traditions, but eventually you need to find a boat and stick to it. It's
Mm.
this idea of like instead of building 10 5-foot holes, you want to build one 50-foot hole. So like I guess the point behind that is you will just keep you need to follow one through into your darkness because otherwise you will keep jumping traditions every time it starts to get
It gets a bit deep.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And what's so
Dang
interesting
it,
is
Val,
that
you keep challenging me. It's
well,
exactly what I do.
well, you're not alone. And you'll like what I'm about to say. I totally agree with that. And I don't feel like that's what I'm doing right now because I know that I am going to my dark
Mm,
places. So I also think that there's something to be said about cherry picking, which is a
yeah.
term that like Christians will warn you against, where you, it, I don't, I, for me, because I am coming from the one boat and everybody else needs to get on this
Right.
boat or
Been there,
they're
done that.
gonna sink. Yeah, it actually at this stage in my life is really healing for me to be like it's not that rigid. I can
Yeah.
actually flow into whatever teaching I need to flow into right now. And I'm trusting that that's where I'm meant to be because I've been trained in mindfulness through the Buddhist tradition.
Hmm.
And I was like, I love most of this, but there is something here that is keeping me from being like, this is it. I'm all in with this
That's how I feel
tradition.
about Buddha as well. It grabs
Really?
me so deeply and it's so helpful, but I'm also on some level going, yeah, this better not be it. Like, it's
Yeah.
gotta be this something, and I don't know what it is. And maybe that's my fear, my ego, terrified because if I do fully embrace it, what will die, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
I'm sure the
I do
Buddhists
feel
would
it.
say that that's what it is.
Yeah, no, they would. I was very conscious of it when I was talking to Stephen last week, and I was just
Yeah.
like, don't mention any kind of like limitation of Buddhism in my mind because I know he'll just
Yeah.
trigger it real good, and I'm gonna have to go deep down that hole. But it's too
Yeah.
much I find
Right.
beautiful about my tradition, about my journey through Christianity. Like, my God, most of it disgusting, but
Yeah.
so much of it I'm like, yes. And someone like Richard Rohr, right? You're just like, yes, yes,
Yes.
that's
Right.
Christianity. I want some of that in my Buddhism, right?
Right. And you
And
see
you,
that it
whoever it
is
is.
that it's not separate. Like I've come
Yeah.
to now, I will say at this point, I I mean, like I am closing my eyes and God, as I've come to understand her, is right here. I mean, like it's not, I don't feel a separation. I did for a long time and I kind of got through that dark night of the soul. But now I, I feel like the, the way that I understand Christianity in its purest form is the exact same thing as Buddhism and the exact same thing as Hinduism. And it's just different figures pointing to the exact same thing, which is like this pure awareness, this oneness with everything, this love and kind universe that gets misunderstood through our own experiences. I mean, like it's all, so I guess if you were giving me a label, I would say mystic, but like to me, I'm like, it's all mystic.
Right. Yeah.
And it's
which type of mysticism?
Form.
Like, and it's like all of it.
Yeah.
I like it all.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I really do still, when I am like communicating with God, whether I'm just meditating and sitting in it or praying, like sometimes a good old fashioned prayer feels really right.
Yeah. Do you still have some sort of personification of God? Does that linger in you to some degree where a she is helpful? This benevolent mother, or is that dissipating? You know, like you ask someone more Buddhist and like, you know, it's like, no, it's reality itself, or like, how do you conceptualize God when you, I mean, maybe in all of the above, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
In everyone, right?
Yeah, I would say that the mother is definitely the most often used. Oh, sorry, I'm getting knocked. Okay. Hello, come in. Oh, I think that's my daughter.
Oh,
never mind. It's okay.
Go to her if you need to. It's okay.
She's with the babysitter. She's totally fine. She must have heard my voice and is knocking.
Bless. It's like that. You remember the toddler video with the big yellow jacket comes strutting in on the news reporter? I've always wanted that moment. I almost had that moment once on one episode of my show, but the child like kind of like just closed the door and like walked away. I was like, I was this close to one of those amazing moments. But
yeah, I love it. I can recognize her tiny little fist knock. Like it's different. She can knock pretty hard, but yeah, so, and it's funny that I said the word mother and then my child literally started knocking at the door. But that is, sometimes it's like, sometimes it really helps me to think of like the divine mother and give it that personification. A lot of times though, it's more ethereal than that, I guess. It's just like the light, it's the thing that's looking out of my eyes into your eyes is the same thing that's looking out of your eyes into my eyes. Like it's that you could build a human body perfectly. I mean, we don't have science yet, but you could build a perfect, exact human body and there still wouldn't be that breath, that like spark of force. So whatever that is, that's kind of what I call God. But when I communicate to God, I still, part of it is exactly the same as it was growing up. So like, that's what I mean by it. It encompasses the God that I was praying to when I was 10, you know. It's changed a little bit in that I don't think it's, you know, I'm just getting a bigger picture.
You're not limited to it, but it's still very helpful as far as a framework to use.
Yeah. And a lot of times my communications with God, where I really feel connected, I'm like, oh yeah, you're like my old buddy that I've always known.
Right.
And you're all these other things.
Remember the time when we were in the Foursquare?
That was a weird phase, huh? Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
So funny. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Val, thank you so much. Honestly, this has been amazing. So good. Honestly, I feel like I had a big list and I feel like in the back of my head, I'm like, I still got about 20 questions I could ask you about all this stuff.
Oh yeah. So, I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could do this again at some point in the future, but honestly,
Sure.
I love the wisdom you bring to the table, and I'm so thankful because you were always the mentioned in passing sweet lady Val that Pete would mention, and
Yeah.
suddenly there's substance to you, and I'm like, wow, this person is amazing. I want to know more. I want to pick their brains. I want to hear more of what
Oh,
they've got. It's a bit weird. I will say, I was saying to my wife before this, I was like, it's gonna be weird listening to Val at like regular speed, because I listen to all my podcasts at like 0.12, maybe like 125, 1.3. So you're like so much more chill than like on my podcast where you're like speaking, which I will say on Pete's show is pretty dangerous anyway. Generally speaking, it
yeah.
can be pretty fast paced. I'm very fast paced. I don't know if anyone ever listens to me faster than one. But no,
Yeah.
it's been such a joy to kind of have a person to
Yeah.
put to the voice in my head the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks. It's been helping me do so much great work, having me talk to myself as I go to the shops and embarrass myself, and then
Yeah.
do more work on that. And yeah, it's been really great.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm so honored that you invited me on, and I love this, talking about this stuff. So I'll come back
Well,
anytime.
you should talk about this stuff a lot more, honestly. So I'm really keen.
Thank
So for
you.
people that are listening, like I mean, obviously people should go listen to the We Made It Weird section of
Hmm.
You Made It Weird, which is Pete's podcast. Don't listen to the rest of the stuff, just We Made It Weird.
Yeah.
That's obviously a great way for them to kind of dive a bit deeper into some of like what you're doing. Are you guys going to do this long term? Is this now a thing that's going to happen, or is this kind of like during COVID we'll see, like, or is it very like
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah, it is kind of who knows, like everything in life right now.
Right.
But we're loving doing it, and
That's awesome.
so yeah, there's no end in sight right now. We're just gonna
Brilliant.
keep at it, and yeah, I feel like that's the best way at this point to access me.
Do you do
You can
social media or
follow.
anything, or are you kind of like, yeah? Because I know I
Yeah,
follow you on Instagram, but I don't know if that's a big thing. I know some people are like, I'm on Instagram, but please don't follow me. I don't
Yeah,
know you
exactly.
people. Like,
Yeah.
I've had people. I had my
No.
brother and my sister-in-law on the show, and they were like, no, I don't want anyone following us. They were like, no.
Yeah, they're like, why'd you bring that up? Edit that out.
Yeah, exactly. We don't
Yeah.
exist. Give us pseudonyms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I would love for anybody to follow me on Instagram. That's the best way. I'm not really on Twitter or Facebook, honestly, because I can't remember my login.
What a joy, though. Both of those places are just cancer to my soul. Honestly, I just hate them both so much.
Right. What is it about Instagram? Like, I know Instagram can be nasty sometimes, but in my experience, it's just like that's where people bring their like best selves or their loving selves or something. I don't know.
I think there's something about with Facebook, you don't have to, but you kind of follow everyone that follows. Like there's a mutuality to it. And so then someone adds you and you're like, and then you're automatically connected to them if you accept. And then you're looking at stuff and like, gosh, you're an idiot, or like, oh, that's the worst, or all these terrible dualistic kind of judgments we start making. And it's like, you vote for who or whatever, right? And that's something I really want to go into, but another time we should go into like all kinds of, because I know you're very big on social justice. You've been talking a lot about Black Lives Matter and stuff, and that with this lens of doing the work of being an observer and not judging and yet being active in this world, I think you do really well, and I've loved what you have said on the podcast. So anyway, we should put that aside because that's a whole rabbit hole. But yeah, it's a weird world, Facebook and Twitter as well. It's a lot, and I'm just like, no, I want the pretty pictures every now and again. Somehow more of a bubble. I don't know if it's just I'm protecting myself from a whole world on Instagram where there are like, I don't know, neo-Nazis and who knows. I just don't see them. They don't show up. They're not commenting on my stuff. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly how I feel. I somehow have curated like everybody I follow, I'm happy to see their posts. And everybody who DMs me or comments, it's like they're just so loving, and it's like this wonderful supportive space. So so you can find me at Valerie and Chaney, Chaney, because I used to, my middle name is Anne, and when I was a kid I thought my name was Valerie and Chaney, like those were my two
amazing
names. So yeah, and then if you follow me, I always post like about the podcast, and then if I like I said, I do teach mindfulness. Right now I'm just teaching one like Zoom class that's private. But if I end up doing something that's open to the public, I'll be announcing it on there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's the best way to get to me at this point.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, everyone should go and check you out for sure, because I'm loving it. You don't do much on Instagram though. I will say, like, you need to step it up.
Well, it's because I have a toddler.
I know.
I have a toddler who, if I take out my phone, she goes, baby, because she wants to watch videos of herself. So any Instagramming I do, I have to do like sitting in the car or like on the toilet, or, like
cling them to you and hold the phone behind.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm so terrible at texting back too. So I just am not great at the phone right now.
That's funny. All right. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been such a privilege, such a joy as well. What a great conversation.
I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, much love to you. Give my love to Pete as well. And thank him for having you on the show, because it's enriched my life. And I'm sure we'll speak again. I'll let you know when this is out and stuff as well. I'll post on Instagram and
Wonderful. Awesome. Right. Well, thank you so much.
Love you, Val. Catch you later. Yeah. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. Bye.